The cul-de-sac of Elmridge was a picture of suburban perfection. Manicured lawns, identical two-story colonial houses with white picket fences, and the faint smell of barbecue drifting through the warm evening air. But the house at the end of the street, number 42, always felt a little off. Its paint was peeling just slightly, the lawn wasn't as impeccably maintained as the neighbors, and the windows always seemed to be drawn shut, hiding whatever lay within. Tonight was the annual neighborhood block party, an event meant to foster community and neighborly goodwill. It was a tradition that had been going on for over a decade. Yet there was a palpable tension in the air, a silent unease that nobody wanted to acknowledge. The residents of Elmridge were blissfully unaware that the foundation of their perfect community was built on a dark and bloody ritual. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, menacing shadows across the street, the atmosphere shifted. The laughter of children playing tag in the yard seemed to echo with a hollow ring. Sarah, a newcomer to the neighborhood, stood on her porch, nursing a glass of wine. She had moved in just 3 months ago, seeking a quiet place after the chaos of the city. But the quiet here was deafening. It was a suffocating silence that made her skin crawl. She watched her neighbors chatting and laughing, their smiles a little too wide, their eyes a little too bright. It felt like a performance, a facade masking something sinister. The air grew chilly, and a shiver ran down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that unseen eyes were tracking her every move from the darkness of number 42. Inside number 42, the air was thick with the scent of copper and incense. The basement, a stark contrast to the normal suburban exterior, was illuminated by the flickering light of dozens of black candles. In the center of the room, a large, intricate symbol was drawn on the concrete floor in dried blood. It was a sigil of an ancient and malevolent deity, a hungry god that demanded a sacrifice every 10 years. The residents of Elmridge had made a pact, a dark bargain for their perfect lives. They traded their souls and the blood of an outsider for prosperity and peace. The time had come for the next offering, and the slasher, a masked figure clad in dark, blood-stained robes, was ready. The mask, a grotesque visage of a contorted human face, hid the identity of the chosen executioner, one of their own neighbors. The party was in full swing when the lights suddenly flickered and died. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The street lights, the porch lights, even the decorative string lights that adorned the trees, everything went black. A heavy silence descended upon the cul-de-sac, broken only by the distant, mournful howl of a dog. Sarah felt a surge of panic. She fumbled for her phone, the screen casting a pale, ghostly glow on her face. "Must be a blown transformer," she heard someone say, their voice trembling slightly, but Sarah knew better. The darkness felt unnatural, a physical entity pressing down on them. She retreated into her house, locking the door behind her. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat of terror. She peeked out the window, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. The neighborhood was transformed, the perfect houses now looming shadows in the night. Then the screaming started. It began as a low, agonizing wail, tearing through the silence like a jagged blade. It came from the direction of the Miller's house, a couple of doors down. The sound sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through Sarah's veins. She watched in horror as the front door of the Miller's house burst open, and Mr. Miller stumbled out onto the lawn, clutching his stomach. Blood poured through his fingers, staining his pristine polo shirt. He collapsed onto the grass, his body writhing in agony. The residents, paralyzed by fear, watched in stunned silence as a figure emerged from the doorway. It was the slasher, the masked executioner. In his hand, he held a massive, serrated hunting knife, the blade dripping with fresh blood. The ritual had begun, and the tranquil suburban street had become a slaughterhouse. The slasher moved with a terrifying, deliberate slowness. There was no rush, no frantic energy. It was the calm, calculated movement of an apex predator. The neighbors, snapping out of their shock, erupted into chaos. Panic spread like a wildfire. People scattered in every direction, screaming and scrambling for safety. Some rushed to their cars, fumbling with keys, only to find the tires slashed. Others bolted for their homes, slamming doors and locking deadbolts. The illusion of safety had been shattered, replaced by raw, primal fear. Sarah backed away from the window, her mind racing. She was trapped. The entire neighborhood was cordoned off, an isolated hunting ground for the masked killer. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The residents weren't just victims. Some of them were complicit. The smiles, the pleasantries, it was all a trap to lure an outsider into their dark ritual. Sarah frantically searched her house for a weapon, her hands trembling. She grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet from the kitchen, her knuckles white with the tight grip. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind against the windows amplified her terror. She crept upstairs, seeking a vantage point. The sounds of carnage echoed from the street. The sickening thud of the blade, the desperate pleas for mercy, the gurgling gasps of the dying. The slasher was methodical, moving from house to house, hunting down the chosen sacrifices. The ritual required specific victims, those who didn't belong, those whose blood would appease the dark entity. Sarah knew she was on that list. She was the outsider, the unblemished offering. The killer's mask, the contorted face of agony, seemed to be etched into her mind, an omen of her impending doom. A loud crash from downstairs shattered the fragile silence of her house. The front door had been kicked open. The sound of heavy, measured footsteps echoed in the hallway. Sarah held her breath, pressing herself against the wall, the skillet raised and ready. The footsteps slowly ascended the stairs, each creak of the wood a countdown to her death. She could hear the killer's breathing, raspy and labored, behind the mask. The scent of copper and incense wafted into the room, a sickening reminder of the ritual. The doorknob slowly turned. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The door swung open, revealing the towering figure of the slasher. The knife gleamed in the dim light, its serrated edge coated in the lifeblood of her neighbors. The killer tilted his head, the grotesque mask staring back at her with hollow eyes. With a desperate primal scream, Sarah swung the skillet with all her might. It collided with the killer's mask with a sickening crunch. The slasher stumbled back, caught off guard by her ferocity. Sarah didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, pushing past the killer and bolted down the stairs. The house was a labyrinth of shadows, but adrenaline fueled her escape. She burst out the front door, the cool night air hitting her flushed face. The cul-de-sac was a war zone. Bodies lay strewn across the manicured lawns, the grass stained a deep, dark red. The remaining neighbors stood in a circle, their faces void of emotion, watching the carnage unfold. They were chanting in a low, guttural language, their voices harmonizing in a terrifying symphony of death. The ritual was nearing its climax, and Sarah was the final piece of the puzzle. Sarah sprinted towards the woods behind the houses, her lungs burning, her legs screaming in protest. The slasher was hot on her heels, the heavy footsteps a constant, terrifying reminder of her pursuit. The chanting grew louder, a cacophony of madness that seemed to vibrate in the very air. The trees loomed ahead, a dark, tangled mass of branches and leaves. Sarah plunged into the forest, the underbrush tearing at her clothes and skin. She didn't look back. She ran until her legs gave out, collapsing onto the damp earth. The sound of the pursuit faded, replaced by the natural sounds of the woods, but the terror remained. She had survived the night, but the memory of the bloody ritual and the contorted mask would haunt her forever. The perfect suburb of Elmridge was a graveyard, a monument to the dark pact they had made, and the sacrifices they had offered in the name of prosperity.